The chilling wind of Xylos Station whipped around tiny, shivering Zara, each gust carrying the jeers and hurried footsteps of aliens who wouldn't meet her tear-filled, seven-faceted Elysian eyes. Amidst the uncaring throng, Brian Davis, a human cargo hauler nursing a lukewarm synth coffee, and the general weariness of a 1,000-light-year haul, paused, his gaze snagged by the forlorn splash of lavender blue huddled against the station's grimy plasteel wall. Others saw a nuisance, a stray. Brian, who knew the sting of being utterly alone in a galaxy that rarely cared, saw only a child whose silent, desolate grief, reflected in the dim, flickering bioluminescence of her skin, screamed of a loss so profound it ached in his own chest she'd lost her mother. Brian's gaze lingered, taking in the way her small shoulders trembled with each gust, the desperate clutch of her 3-fingered hands on a small, worn satchel that seemed her only possession in the vast, echoing concourse. Around her, a river of diverse life forms flowed, a towering mantis-like Thranxian, its antennae twitching with impatience, a pair of gelatinous qual traders, their forms wobbling as they debated prices, a sleek, cybernetically enhanced Varan diplomat, its optical sensors ignoring everything beyond its programmed path. None of them spared the child a glance. They simply adjusted their trajectories, a minor, unconscious correction to avoid an insignificant obstacle. A knot tightened in Brian's chest. His own fatigue, the gnawing hunger for a hot meal, and the blessed silence of his bunk pulled at him. He almost turned, almost let the current of the station carry him away. Just keep walking, Davis. Not your problem. But then, a flicker of memory, sharp and cold as vacuum, a younger version of himself lost in a different kind of crowd, the ache of invisibility a physical weight. He winced, the lukewarm coffee suddenly bitter on his tongue. A station security drone, all polished chrome and impassive blue lenses, hummed past Zara's huddled form. Its sensor array swept the area, cataloging, assessing, but its programming evidently found nothing in the small, shivering child to warrant intervention. She was beneath its notice, a piece of biological static in the station's complex data stream. Her vulnerability, stark and absolute, was a raw nerve exposed to the indifferent air. Brian let out a slow breath. The desire for rest, for simple sustenance, receded, pushed aside by a rising tide of something else, something he hadn't felt so keenly in years. The immediate, undeniable reality of Zara's peril eclipsed his own minor discomforts. This child was alone, utterly and terrifyingly alone. Just then, a hulking, four-armed Groznak, its thick hide scarred and its breath a foul miasma of fermented krill, blundered through the crowd. One of its heavy, clawed feet carelessly struck Zara, sending her sprawling onto the hard deck plating. Her small satchel skittered away, coming to rest near a refuse chute. The Groznak let out a guttural grunt, something that might have been an insult in its gravelly tongue, and stomped on, oblivious. That was it. Brian's teeth clenched. He set his synth coffee down on a nearby public data terminal with a decisive thud. "Hey! Watch it, you overgrown brute," he called out, his voice tight with a sudden sharp anger, though the Groznak was already disappearing into the throng. He was already moving, pushing off from the wall, his weariness forgotten. He reached Zara in 3 long strides, kneeling beside her small, fallen shape. His movements were deliberately slow, his hands held open and non-threatening. "Easy there, little one," he murmured, his voice softer than he'd intended. He gently helped her sit up, then eased her to her feet, his hand briefly supporting her trembling back. He retrieved the satchel, brushing off a smear of grime from its worn surface. Zara flinched violently as his fingers brushed her arm, a gasp tearing from her. Her lavender-blue skin pulsed erratically, a chaotic light show of pale, sickly yellow and bruised indigo. Her 7-faceted eyes, enormous in her small face, fixed on him, reflecting a universe of raw terror. A series of rapid, high-pitched clicks and whistles, sharp with distress, spilled from her. Brian kept his voice low, a calm anchor in her storm of fear. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." He held up his hands, palms out. "Are you hurt? Where's your mama?" Zara stared, her breathing shallow and fast. Then, a tiny, choked sound, like a shattered crystal chime. "Liar!" Her small hand gestured vaguely upwards, then swept outwards, as if indicating something vast and empty. A soft, mournful keen followed, a sound of pure loss, and she shook her head, a tiny, definitive negation. Her bioluminescence dimmed, settling into a deep, sorrowful violet. As he handed the satchel back to her, his thumb brushed against a small metallic emblem sewn into its synth leather flap. It wasn't a corporate logo he recognized, nor any common planetary sigil. It was a stylized spiral, like a miniature galaxy, with a single sharp point at its heart. The design was unfamiliar, yet it snagged his attention, a tiny, discordant note in the overwhelming symphony of the child's distress. Looking from the strange symbol back to Zara's tear-streaked, grief-stricken face, a profound sense of unavoidable responsibility settled over Brian, heavier than any load of cargo he'd ever hauled. The weariness was still there, a dull ache in his bones, but it was now overlaid with a grim certainty. He couldn't walk away. He wouldn't. The universe, it seemed, had just dealt him a hand he had to play. "Come on, kid," Brian said softly, his voice still gentle, offering one hand, palm up. "Let's get you somewhere warm, somewhere safe. We'll figure this out." Zara's multifaceted eyes searched his face, a desperate flickering light within their deep violet depths. Her own tiny, 3-fingered hand, the lavender-blue skin almost translucent, trembled in the space between them. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, she slowly, hesitantly, placed it into his. Her grip, when it came, was surprisingly firm for one so small, a fragile anchor in a sea of uncertainty. He closed his fingers around hers and, with a final glance back at the uncaring river of aliens, began to lead her away from the bustling main concourse, towards the relative shadows and echoing quiet of the cargo bays. Brian led Zara through the cargo bay, the dimly lit corridors of the Wanderer's Rest. Feeling a world away from the bustling station, she clung tightly to his hand, her small 3-fingered grip surprisingly strong. The air hung thick with the smells of ozone, recycled coolant, and the faint metallic tang of the ship's aging hull. Zara was visibly trembling, each echoing clang and hiss of the ship's systems sending a fresh wave of fear through her. Inside the Wanderer's Rest, Zara stared wide-eyed. The station, for all its cold indifference, had offered vast open spaces. Here, everything was cramped and utilitarian. Cables snaked across the floor, tools hung from magnetic strips on the walls, and the only seating option appeared to be a repurposed cargo crate, its faded markings hinting at a long-forgotten shipment of synth leather. Brian awkwardly gestured for her to sit, patting the crate with a gloved hand. "Here you go, kid." Not exactly 5-star, but it's safe, he mumbled, already regretting the inadequacy of his hospitality. He rummaged in a small dented locker, pulling out a standard human nutrient paste packet. All right, let's see. Protein blend. Should give you some energy. He tore open the packet with his teeth and offered it to her. Zara recoiled as if he'd offered her poison. Her bioluminescence, already dim, flickered violently, a sickly grey hue washing over her skin. She gagged, turning her head away from the metallic-smelling goo. The paste dripped from the corner of the packet, a glistening globule of utter rejection. Brian sighed, tossing the packet into a waste disposal unit with a soft thunk. He continued to rummage, his search becoming increasingly frantic. Okay, what else have I got? He pulled out a dried fruit bar, a vacuum-sealed algae cake, and a dented can of protein supplement. Each offering was met with the same look of revulsion, the grey tinge to her bioluminescence deepening with each rejection. He internally berated himself. Idiot. Should have stocked up properly. Always thinking of yourself, Davis. His usual solitary hauls required little more than basic sustenance. He hadn't anticipated this. Zara, despite her fear, tentatively reached out and touched a small, potted plant sitting precariously near Brian's bunk. It was a hardy, genetically modified species, designed to thrive in low-light, low-water environments, a splash of green in the otherwise sterile environment. As her slender fingers brushed against its leaves, her bioluminescence briefly shifted, the sickly grey fading, replaced by a soft, curious green. Brian, noticing the change, carefully moved the plant closer to her. "You like that, huh?" He watched her closely as she gently stroked the leaves, her bioluminescence calming slightly, the green hue deepening. It wasn't much, but it was a clue. A hint of comfort in this alien environment. He tried to communicate, using simple gestures and the few phrases he knew in galactic common. Tired, hurt, hungry, he pointed to himself, then to her, then mimed eating. But she only stared back at him with frightened, uncomprehending eyes. The language barrier, a stark reminder of their different worlds. Brian gestured towards a spare storage compartment, a narrow space barely large enough to accommodate a human adult. He'd cleared it out, stuffing it with soft blankets and a couple of spare pillows. Bed. Sleep? But she remained hesitant, her gaze fixed on the cramped space with visible apprehension. It probably looked like a coffin to her, he thought grimly. Zara clutched her satchel tightly, refusing to let it go, even as Brian tried to coax her towards the makeshift bed. She held onto it with a desperate strength, her fingers tightening against the worn fabric. It was more than just a bag. It was a lifeline, a tangible link to her lost life. Realizing her distress, Brian relented. He carefully placed the satchel beside the blankets, hoping it would provide some sense of security. He dimmed the lights, casting the compartment in a soft blue glow. He spoke to her in a soothing voice, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping the tone would convey his intention. "It's okay, kid. You're safe now. I promise." As Zara finally settled into the makeshift bed, curling up around her satchel, Brian noticed something he hadn't seen before. A small, intricate device was attached to the inside of the satchel, partially hidden from view. It was made of a dark, polished metal, etched with unfamiliar symbols. It looked advanced, far beyond anything he'd expect a child to possess. Curiosity piqued. Brian turned to the Wanderer's Rest's outdated computer system. He typed in Elysian physiology and dietary needs, the keyboard clattering under his calloused fingers. The search returned a jumble of fragmented and often contradictory information. Ancient xenobiological surveys, speculative medical reports, and sensationalized news articles about exotic Elysian customs. The sum total of human knowledge about her species was woefully inadequate. He recalled a brief encounter with an Elysian trader on a previous haul, a stop at a remote trading post on the edge of the Gliese system. He remembered the trader consuming a specific type of nutrient paste, a vibrant green concoction that seemed to glow with an inner light. He vaguely remembered the name, Lumina Gro, or something similar. Brian checked his ship's manifest, his heart sinking as he scrolled through the list of cargo, and then he saw it. Lumina Gro nutrient paste, 12 cases destination. Kepler 180, 6F research outpost. A small quantity, but enough to keep Zara alive for a while. A moral dilemma slammed into him. The paste wasn't his. It belonged to someone else, some research outpost light years away. Stealing it would be a violation of his contract, a crime punishable by hefty fines and potential revocation of his hauler's license. He glanced back at Zara. She had finally fallen asleep, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her bioluminescence flickered softly, a mix of sadness and exhaustion playing across her skin. He remembered his wife, the way her laughter used to fill their small apartment, the warmth of her hand in his. He lost her to a freak accident, a cargo container that broke loose during a hyperspace jump. He had been alone ever since. He couldn't let that happen to Zara, he wouldn't. Brian took a deep breath and decided to try and contact the person who requested the cargo. He opened a comm channel and sent a message, creating the question of whether he will be able to get the cargo. The faint energy tickled at the edge of Brian's awareness, a subtle hum that resonated not in his ears, but somewhere deeper, a primal instinct screaming caution. He tightened his hold on Zara, masking his unease. "Easy, kiddo," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her lavender-blue skin. "Just a little tired, that's all." He needed that nutrient paste. Zara's silence was more telling than any words. He accessed the station's comm network, his fingers flying across the worn keypad. "Krell," he muttered, initiating the call. "Elysian nutrient paste. You still holding?" A grainy image flickered onto the screen, a stocky alien with thick, chitinous plates ringing his neck and shrewd, multifaceted eyes. "Krell." "Depends," the trader rasped, his voice like gravel grinding against metal. "Got what you need, human, but these ain't cheap, and I don't usually deal with strays." Brian's teeth gritted. "She's not a stray. She's under my protection. I need that paste. Name your price." Krell's gaze narrowed. "Meet me at the Gyro Grill, Level 3, Docking Bay C7. An hour. Come alone." "I'm bringing her," Brian countered, his voice firm. "You want to see she's the real deal. You see her. Otherwise, we're done." Krell hesitated, then grunted. "Fine, but keep her hidden. Some folks get twitchy around Elysian, especially orphans." The screen went dark. Brian wrapped Zara tighter in his coat, the fabric rough against her delicate skin. He adjusted his stride to shield her from the jostling crowds as they navigated the station's labyrinthine corridor. The Gyro Grill was a dimly lit, smoky dive, the air thick with the aroma of recycled protein and illicit synth spice. Krell sat at a grimy table in the back, his eyes scanning the room. As Brian approached, Krell's gaze locked onto the barely visible form within Brian's coat. Let's see her, he demanded, his voice low. Brian carefully pulled back the coat, revealing Zara's face. Her large, seven-faceted eyes blinked in the dim light, her bioluminescence a weak, flickering violet. Krell leaned closer, his chitinous plates clicking softly. Elysian, all right, and not in good shape. Lights all wrong, malnourished, stressed. He looked up at Brian, his expression unreadable. You know anything about Elysian physiology, human? Enough to know she needs that paste, Brian replied, his voice tight. Krell sighed, a sound like air hissing from a punctured tire. That paste is specifically formulated for young Elysians. Without it, her development will be stunted, her empathic abilities diminished. Prolonged deficiency could lead to serious neurological damage. He paused, his gaze softening slightly. They need very specific nutrients, you see. It's not just food to them, it's everything. Brian felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. So you'll give it to me? Krell nodded slowly. I will. I can see you genuinely care about her, but be warned, human. Elysians are often targets. Their empathic abilities make them valuable to the wrong people. Slavery, exploitation. It's a dark corner of the galaxy. He lowered his voice further. That satchel of hers, it might hold clues about her past, about why she's alone. Examine it carefully. You might not like what you find. Krell slid a small sealed container across the table. Nutrient paste, enough for a week. After that, you'll need more. And I expect to hear from you. Back on the Wanderer's Rest, Brian carefully opened the container. The paste was a shimmering opalescent green with a faint, sweet scent. He prepared a small portion, offering it to Zara with a gentle smile. Here you go, kiddo. Eat up. Zara hesitated, her eyes wide, then slowly reached out a three-fingered hand and took the container. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, her bioluminescence gradually shifting to a hopeful pale green. As she ate, the chaotic flickering subsided, replaced by a steadier, calmer glow. Relief washed over Brian. He watched her for a long moment, then quietly began to examine her satchel. It was worn and faded, the fabric soft with age. Inside he found a few simple toys, a small tattered blanket, and a worn datapad. The datapad displayed fragmented images and text in an unfamiliar flowing script. Elysian, no doubt. He probed deeper, his fingers tracing the seams of the satchel. He found a hidden compartment, carefully concealed beneath the lining. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft fabric, was a small amulet. It was intricately crafted from a dark metallic substance, with an unfamiliar symbol etched onto its surface, a stylized spiral, radiating outwards. As Brian examined the amulet, Zara stirred in her sleep. Her bioluminescence flared briefly, a sudden burst of fear that pulsed through the small cabin, followed by a soft whimper. Brian quickly hid the amulet, sliding it back into the hidden compartment and pretending to be asleep. Zara's eyes fluttered open, her gaze fixed on him, a mixture of fear and confusion swirling within their 7 facets. She reached out a tentative hand and gently touched his. Her bioluminescence shifted again, this time to a soft, calming blue, seemingly sensing his genuine concern. Brian smiled reassuringly, his heart aching for her. He reached out and offered her a comforting hug, holding her close. "It's okay, Zara," he whispered. "I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." As he held her, he felt it again, that faint energy signature, now emanating clearly from the amulet hidden within her satchel. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, But it was there, and it was growing stronger. He needed to know what it was. He needed to know what it meant. He needed to find someone who could decipher the Elysian dialect on that datapad, someone who could identify the symbol on that amulet. Their next destination was clear. Brian frowned at the Elysian text displayed on the Wanderer's Rest's small computer screen. Symbols swam before his eyes, alien angles and curves that refused to dedication into anything familiar. He cross-referenced them against every language database he could access, Galactic Common, Highgath, even obscure trader dialects, but found no matches. The datapad, recovered from Zara's satchel, remained stubbornly encrypted. He glanced over at Zara, curled up in a nest of blankets he'd fashioned in the corner of the cockpit. Her large, seven-faceted eyes were fixed on him, her lavender-blue skin shimmering with a soft, uncertain light. He'd started to notice patterns in that light, subtle variations that seemed to correlate with her emotions. He pulled up a blank data slate and began to sketch, carefully documenting the bioluminescent patterns he'd observed. A soft, pulsing gold seemed to indicate curiosity, while a pale, almost watery green signaled comfort. A sharp, flickering blue, like the static discharge of a faulty capacitor, meant fear. It was rudimentary, but it was a start. Zara, sensing his efforts to understand her, tilted her head, her bioluminescence shifting through a spectrum of colors as if considering his actions. Then, deliberately, she focused her light into a slow, steady pulse of pale green, followed by a rapid flicker of gold towards a half-empty ration pack. Hunger. Okay, kid, Brian murmured, a smile tugging at his lips. I'm getting the hang of this. He heated a nutrient paste, carefully monitoring her reaction. She wrinkled her nose at the first whiff, her light dimming to a dull violet, but perked up when he added a dash of spice he'd found in his dwindling supplies. Later, as he piloted the Wanderer's Rest through the inky blackness between stations, Zara pointed a delicate three-fingered hand towards a specific setting on the ship's environmental controls. He hadn't paid much attention to the readings before, but now he saw that she was indicating a sensitivity to certain light frequencies and atmospheric conditions. He adjusted the ship's lighting, dimming the harsh fluorescence and switching to a warmer, softer spectrum. He tweaked the atmosphere, increasing the humidity slightly. The effect was immediate. Zara visibly relaxed, her bioluminescence brightening to a steady, contented lavender. She even managed a small, almost inaudible sigh. In a quiet moment, as they drifted through the void, Zara's gaze fell upon a faded photograph taped to Brian's console. It was a picture of him with a woman, her arm looped through his, both smiling into the camera. Zara's bioluminescence dimmed, the edges flickering with a hint of sadness, a somber violet bleeding into the blue. Brian sighed, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch the photograph. "That was my wife, Sarah," he said, his voice rough with unshed tears. "She died a few years back. Transport accident. Bad luck, bad timing." The lie felt heavy on his tongue, but he couldn't bring himself to tell Zara the full story. Not yet. Zara reached out and gently touched his cheek, her small hand surprisingly warm against his skin. Her bioluminescence shifted again, settling into a calming, almost hypnotic blue, a silent offering of comfort and understanding. While docked at Xylos Station, refueling and restocking supplies, Brian overheard a hushed conversation between two dockworkers. "Rack down on illegal alien trafficking. Station security's been all over the lower levels." "Yeah, heard they're looking for Elysians," the other replied. spitting a stream of amber fluid onto the grimy plasteel floor. Worth a fortune on the black market they are. Something about their empathic abilities. Brian's blood ran cold. He glanced back at the Wanderer's rest, his mind racing. Elysians. Zara. He had to get her off this station. Now, as he hurried back to the ship, he noticed a figure standing in the shadows, watching him and Zara. The individual was tall and gaunt, their face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but their gaze lingered on Zara with an unsettling intensity, a predatory glint that sent shivers down Brian's spine. He quickened his pace, his hand instinctively reaching for the stunner he kept tucked in his belt. He needed fuel, he needed supplies, but more than anything, he needed to get Zara to safety. Brian cautiously approached a contact on the station, a shifty Rhodian named Grease, known for dealing in rare artifacts and languages. Grease operated out of a dimly lit stall in the station's sprawling marketplace, surrounded by dusty relics and strange trinkets. "Grease," Brian said, his voice low. "I need some information, and I need it fast." The Rhodian's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Information is my business, human. What's your pleasure?" Brian placed the amulet on the counter, its intricate carvings gleaming in the dim light. "I need to know what this is, and I need someone who can translate this," he added, sliding the datapad across the counter. Grease picked up the amulet, his long, slender fingers tracing its contours. "Interesting," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "This is a symbol of the Clan of Whispers, a reclusive Elysian clan known for their powerful empathic abilities." He examined the datapad with a practiced eye. "This amulet," he continued, "it's a key to unlock the encrypted files on this datapad. But be warned, human. Accessing this information, it could attract unwanted attention. The Clan of Whispers. They have enemies. Can you help me?" Brian asked, his voice tight with urgency. Grease chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Help is my specialty, but it comes at a price, a significant payment, and a favor." At a later date, Brian hesitated. He didn't trust Grease, not one bit, but he was running out of options. "What kind of favor?" "Let's just say," Grease replied, his eyes gleaming, "that I occasionally require. Discreet transport. Nothing illegal, of course. Just sensitive." Brian weighed his options. The risks were high, but Zara's safety was paramount. "All right," he said, his voice grim. "I agree to your terms." He had to understand Zara's past, if he was going to protect her future. As Brian and Zara prepared to leave Xylos Station, they were confronted by the suspicious individual from before. He stepped out of the shadows, his face now visible in the harsh station lighting. His eyes were cold and calculating, his expression devoid of emotion. "The Elysian," he said, his voice a low growl. "She belongs to us." He lunged forward, his hand outstretched, attempting to grab Zara. Brian reacted instantly, shoving Zara behind him and drawing his stunner. "Stay back," he yelled, his heart pounding in his chest. The attacker ignored him, his movements swift and precise. He dodged Brian's stun blast and grabbed Zara, pulling her towards him. Zara cried out, her bioluminescence flickering erratically with pain and fear. The attacker's grip tightened, his fingers digging into her delicate skin. Brian tackled the attacker, knocking him to the ground. A scuffle ensued, a chaotic flurry of blows and curses. Zara was caught in the middle, whimpering in terror. In the chaos, the attacker managed to slash at Zara with a small, concealed blade. A thin line of crimson blood welled up on her arm, her bioluminescence dimming to a sickly, pulsating gray. Brian roared with rage, his adrenaline surging. He managed to disarm the attacker and pin him to the ground, but Zara was injured, and time was running out. He looked down at her, her large tear-filled eyes pleading for help. He had a choice to make: flee the station immediately, risking pursuit, or stay and seek medical attention, potentially exposing them both to even greater danger. Brian stared at Zara, her small form trembling slightly even in the relative warmth of the cargo bay. Just a scratch, the alien who'd shoved her had said, but the way she flinched, the dull violet tinge to her bioluminescence, spoke of more than just a surface wound. He could leave, jump to hyperspace, and put Xylos Station behind them. But could he live with himself if that scratch festered, if something worse developed? No, he couldn't. He found the address etched into a plasteel plate tucked beneath a flickering neon sign. Chirurgeon Discreet Medical Solutions. The air grew thick with the cloying scent of disinfectant and something vaguely reptilian as they descended into the station's underbelly. The chirurgeon, a hulking Krogan with scarred mandibles and weary eyes, barely glanced at Brian before turning his attention to Zara. His massive hands, surprisingly gentle, probed her arm. Elysian, he grunted, more to himself than to Brian. Sensitive physiology. This scratch, minor, but requires specialized treatment. Xylos atmosphere isn't kind to your kind, little one. Specialized treatment? Brian asked, his gut tightening. The Krogan fixed him with a stare. Rare enzymes, specific, atmospheric sealant. Expensive. And difficult to acquire, even on a cesspool like Xylos. He named a price that made Brian's breath catch in his throat. It would gut his reserves, leaving him barely enough for fuel. I don't have that much in credits, Brian admitted, his voice tight. The chirurgeon shrugged, mandibles clicking. Credits are preferred, but I also accept certain goods. Refined tellurium, decanted rill spice, pre-war synth ale, things that ease the tedium. Brian spent the next hour bartering, trading spare parts, a ration synthesizer, and even his cherished pre-war synth ale for the promise of Zara's treatment. He watched as the chirurgeon applied a shimmering, opalescent gel to her arm, the violet fading from her skin, replaced by a soft, healthy lavender. While Zara rested, Brian slipped into a shadowed alcove and activated his comm. Grease, it's Davis. I need information. Grease's voice, distorted by static, crackled in his ear. Davis, I told you to disappear. You're stirring up trouble you can't handle. Someone attacked us, tried to grab Zara. I need to know who they are. Grease hesitated. I don't know anything, Davis, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. This is above your pay grade. Above mine, too. She's just a kid, Grease, Brian snapped, his voice rising. Who would want to hurt a kid? A long silence followed. Finally, Grease sighed. All right, all right. What I heard, whispers, mind you, is that there's a group operating on Xylos, calls themselves the Silent Hand. Silent Hand? What do they want? Rare things, valuable things, things that fetch a high price on the black market. They specialize in acquiring alien specimens. Brian felt a chill crawl down his spine. Specimens? You mean like Zara? I don't know. All I'm saying is they're ruthless. They have connections, and they don't care who they hurt to get what they want. You need to get off Xylos, Davis, now, before they find you again. Grease cut the connection. Brian found Zara sitting on the edge of the medical bed, her eyes wide. "Are you okay?" he asked, kneeling before her. She nodded, but her bioluminescence flickered with a nervous energy. As they stepped out of the chirurgeons, a figure detached itself from the shadows. Tall, clad in nondescript grey, a blaster pistol materialized in their hand. "The Elysian belongs to the Silent Hand," the figure rasped, their voice distorted by a modulator. Brian shoved Zara behind him. "Get back!" He lunged, but the agent was faster, firing a stun blast that grazed his arm. Pain seared through him as he grabbed Zara's hand and bolted, the agent hot on their heels. They plunged into the station's labyrinthine corridors, the agent's footsteps echoing behind them. Zara tugged on his hand, pulling him left, then right. "This way," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the station's hum. "Danger, that way. Safe, this way." Her bioluminescence pulsed erratically, but Brian trusted her instincts. They reached the Wanderer's Rest, its familiar bulk a welcome sight. But as Brian initiated the launch sequence, a string of error messages flashed across the console. "Engines sabotaged," the ship's computer announced flatly. "Launch sequence aborted." "Damn it." Brian smacked his palm against the console. He grabbed his toolkit, his mind racing. He could fix this, he had to. "Zara, keep watch. Tell me if you see anything." He worked feverishly, sparks flying as he bypassed damaged circuits. Zara stood beside him, her bioluminescence a nervous dance of blues and green. As he worked, he noticed something glinting beneath the ship's hull. A small metallic disc. He pried it loose. A tracking device. "They know where we are," he muttered, crushing the device under his boot. He could disable the tracker, but they would be expecting him to leave. He needed a new plan. He looked at Zara, her eyes wide with fear, but also with a flicker of something else. Willpower. He knew he couldn't outrun the Silent Hand. He needed to disappear. He needed help. He thought of the smugglers, the hidden tunnels, the whispers of a black market docking bay. "Come on, kid," he said, his voice grim. "We're not going anywhere in this rust bucket, but I know a few people who might be able to help us get out of here." Zara reached out and took his hand, her small three-fingered hand fitting perfectly in his. Her bioluminescence shifted, the nervous energy replaced by a steady, calming blue, a silent promise. "I'm with you," her eyes seemed to say. They slipped out of the Wanderer's Rest and into the shadows, unaware that the tunnels ahead held dangers far greater than they could imagine. The Silent Hand was waiting. Brian cursed under his breath, the freighter's failing power grid flickering erratically. He'd seen the telltale signs, the subtle energy spikes, the delayed response from the station's automated systems. The Silent Hand hadn't just tracked them, they'd anticipated their every move. "Zara, hold tight," he muttered, already inputting the override codes. Time for a little fireworks show. His fingers danced across the console, initiating the self-destruct sequence. A klaxon blared, bathing the cramped cockpit in a harsh red light. The freighter bucked violently as the engines shut down, followed by a series of controlled explosions that ripped through the dilapidated vessel. Brian grabbed Zara, shielding her from the worst of the shaking, and propelled them both out of the cockpit and back into the maze of maintenance tunnels they had used to sneak aboard. Chaos erupted around them. Alarms screamed, emergency lights flashed, and the station's PA system blared frantic warnings. The air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal and the panicked shouts of station personnel. "Stay close," Brian yelled, his voice barely audible above the din. He pulled Zara along, weaving through the narrow, dimly lit tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the confined space. Behind them, He could hear the heavy thud of boots and the crackle of energy weapons. The silent hand was in pursuit. They burst into a larger, cavernous tunnel, where a group of scavengers huddled around a flickering makeshift fire. The scavengers, a motley collection of humans and various alien species, were ragged and wary, their faces etched with desperation. They immediately turned hostile, brandishing rusty pipes and scavenged energy weapons. "Credits or corpses?" a gruff voice snarled. "Your choice." Zara, her eyes wide with fear, instinctively reached out with her empathic abilities. Her bioluminescence pulsed with a soft lavender light, washing over the scavengers. The effect was immediate and profound. The scavengers' aggressive postures softened, their faces etched with a shared sense of sorrow and vulnerability. They saw, in Zara's light, their own fears, their own losses, their own desperate struggle for survival. We don't want to hurt you," Zara whispered, her voice trembling. We need help." A woman stepped forward, her face hardened, but her eyes filled with a flicker of compassion. She was human, with close-cropped hair, and a network of scars crisscrossing her arms. "I'm Rena," she said, her voice rough but not unkind. "What's your story?" Brian, still wary, quickly explained their situation, omitting the details about Zara's origins. Rena listened intently, her gaze shifting between Brian and Zara. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "The Silent Hand," she said, her voice grim. "They're bad news. Ruthless. Well-connected. They want that kid." "Why?" Brian asked, his hand instinctively tightening around Zara's. Rena shrugged. "Doesn't matter. What matters is they'll stop at nothing to get her." She paused, considering. "I can offer you a temporary hiding place. It's not much, but it's better than wandering these tunnels alone." She led them deeper into the underbelly of the station, through a labyrinth of narrow passages and makeshift shelters, until they reached a hidden alcove. The alcove was cramped and dirty, but it offered a degree of privacy and security. "It's not the Ritz," Rena said, "but it's safe. For now." She looked at Brian, her eyes narrowed. "I know a way off this station. A way that the Silent Hand won't expect, but it'll cost you a share of your remaining credits and a promise to take me with you." Brian hesitated. He didn't trust Rena, not completely, but he saw no other option. "How do I know I can trust you?" he asked. Rena met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "You don't," she said. "But you don't have a choice, do you?" He looked at Zara, her face pale and drawn. He knew he had to do whatever it took to protect her. "All right," he said, his voice tight. "You have a deal." Rena nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Good. We leave at first cycle. Be ready." As Rena led them through the twisting tunnels, Brian couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Rena's questions were too casual, too probing. She seemed particularly interested in Zara's abilities and her connection to him. His suspicions grew with each passing meter. They reached a secluded section of the tunnels, a dead end with a single, unmarked maintenance hatch. "This is it," Rena said, her voice flat. "The exit point." Brian stopped, his senses on high alert. The air was too still, too quiet. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck prickling. "I don't like this," he said, his voice low. "Something's not right." Rena turned to face him, her expression hardening. "What are you talking about? This is the way out." "No," Brian said, his hand instinctively reaching for the energy pistol hidden beneath his jacket. "This is a trap." Before Rena could respond, Silent hand agents emerged from the shadows, their weapons drawn and aimed directly at Brian and Zara. "Well, well," a voice sneered. "Looks like our little bird brought a surprise." Rena flinched, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and guilt. I didn't have a choice," she stammered. "They promised me a lot of credits." A firefight erupted, the confined space amplifying the deafening blasts of energy weapons. Brian dove for cover, pulling Zara down with him. He returned fire, his shots precise and deadly, but the silent hand agents were well trained and heavily armed. In the chaos, Rena turned and fled, disappearing back into the tunnels. Zara, her eyes glowing with an intense, violet light, reached out with her empathic abilities. Sensing the turmoil within Rena's heart, she saw the fear, the regret, the desperation that had driven her to betray them. She realized that Rena hadn't acted out of malice, but out of coercion. Brian managed to subdue the remaining silent hand agents, his body aching and his clothes torn. But Rena was gone. He looked at Zara, his face grim. "We can't trust anyone here," he said, his voice tight. "We're on our own." They continued deeper into the tunnels, searching for another way out. Finally, they discovered a hidden maintenance hatch, small and easily overlooked. It led to the station's exterior, offering a risky but potentially viable escape route. As they prepared to venture out into the vacuum of space, Zara reached out with her senses, her bioluminescence flickering erratically. "Wait," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "There's something. An energy signature. It's faint, but it's there. A trap." Brian cursed under his breath. They were running out of options. He looked at Zara, his heart filled with a mixture of fear and perseverance. "Then we'll just have to be careful," he said, his voice firm. "We'll face it together." He took a deep breath, bracing himself for the dangers that lay ahead. He activated his suit's environmental controls, the hiss of oxygen filling the small space. He looked at Zara, her small hand clasped tightly in his. Together they stepped towards the hatch and the uncertain future beyond. Brian's gut churned. Too easy. The transport had slipped through the station's automated defense grid with laughable ease. No pursuit, no alarms, nothing. He hadn't believed it for a second. "Zara, stay close." He gestured to the transport's diagnostics panel, its readings nonsensical to her 7-faceted eyes. "See these numbers? They're lying. I think someone wants us to think we're safe." He grabbed a handful of scavenged components, a cracked energy cell, some frayed wiring, a discarded sensor array, and began soldering them together with practiced ease. Zara watched, her lavender skin shimmering with a nervous violet hue. "Trap?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Brian grunted, sparks flying as he connected a final wire. "Wouldn't be surprised. This thing's supposed to detect energy signatures. Crude, but better than nothing." He activated the device. The makeshift sensor sputtered, displaying a jumble of static. Damn, interference. But wait. He adjusted a dial, his brow furrowed in concentration. "There. Faint, but consistent. It's attached to the exterior hatch." His suspicion confirmed. Brian worked quickly, jury-rigging a disruptor from a discarded plasma torch. "Proximity mine. Old model, but still packs a punch. I'm going to disable it. Stay here, Zara. Don't touch anything." Zara's eyes widened. "Dangerous. Safer than opening that hatch with a mine attached," Brian countered, already sealing his helmet. He grabbed a magnetic clamp and a length of cable. "I'll be tethered. Just keep an eye on me." He cycled the airlock, the hiss of escaping atmosphere deafening. The inner hatch opened, revealing the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. He clamped the magnetic tether to the transport's hull and carefully opened the outer hatch a crack. Peering out, the mine was there all right. A dull metallic sphere clinging to the hatch like a malevolent barnacle. He took a breath, then braced himself against the hatch frame and forced it open fully, exposing himself to the vacuum. The cold was immediate, biting through the scavenged environmental suit. He worked quickly, attaching the disruptor to the mine. His fingers, clumsy in the thick gloves, fumbled with the controls. Zara watched from inside, her bioluminescence a frantic strobe of fear. She pressed her small hand against the inner hatch as if she could reach him. Brian activated the disruptor. The mine's light flickered, then died. He quickly retreated back inside, sealing the hatch behind him. "That's one less problem," he said, his breath clouding the visor. He cycled the airlock again, and this time when the outer hatch slid open, it revealed not oblivion but a narrow, dimly lit access tunnel. Well, that's unexpected. The tunnel was barely wide enough to squeeze through, the walls lined with exposed wiring and dripping condensation. Zara hesitated. "Where? Go?" "No idea," Brian admitted. "But it's better than staying here. Come on." He adjusted her environmental suit, ensuring the seal was tight. "Stay close, and try not to touch anything." He activated a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. They moved slowly through the tunnel, the silence broken only by the hiss of their respirators and the drip, drip, drip of condensation. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a larger space, a damaged section of the station's hull, patched with scavenged metal and plasteel. Clustered around the damaged section were makeshift shelters cobbled together from debris and scrap, clinging to the station's exterior like desperate barnacles. "What are those?" Zara asked, her voice filled with wonder and a hint of fear. Brian zoomed in his helmet display. "Looks like people. Refugees, maybe." He activated the external comm. "This is Brian Davis." "Is anyone there?" A crackling voice responded, imbued with static. "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice was wary, hardened. "We're just passing through. Saw your settlement. Need any help?" Silence. Then, "Help? From station rats? I doubt it. Get lost." The comm cut off. Brian sighed. "Friendly bunch." He deactivated the comm. "Come on, Zara. Let's see if we can't change their minds." They detached their tether from the transport and carefully made their way towards the shelters, stepping over twisted metal and exposed wiring. As they approached, figures emerged from the shelters, their faces gaunt and wary. They were a motley crew, humans, greys, even a few hulking krogs, all wearing scavenged clothing and makeshift environmental gear. They carried crude weapons pipes, stun batons, even a rusty plasma pistol. A tall, muscular human with a shaved head and a network of scars etched across his face stepped forward. "I'm Jack. You got 5 seconds to tell me why you're here before I space you." Brian held up his hands. "Easy, Jax. We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to talk." "Talk? We don't need to talk. We need to survive. And you two look like you've got nothing to offer but trouble." Jax's eyes narrowed. "Spies? Maybe? Sent by the station to flush us out?" Zara stepped forward, her bioluminescence shifting to a soft, calming blue. She reached out a 3-fingered hand towards Jax. "Not spies," she said softly. "Just lost, like you." Jax hesitated, his expression softening slightly. He looked into Zara's large, multifaceted eyes, then back at Brian. "What is she?" "An Elysian," Brian replied. "Her name is Zara." Jax studied Zara for a long moment, his gaze intense. Then he sighed. "All right. You can stay, but one wrong move and you're both out the airlock. Understand?" "Understood," Brian said, relieved. Jax led them into one of the shelters, a cramped, dimly lit space filled with the smell of recycled air and stale food. Children huddled in the corners, their faces pale and thin. An elderly gray woman tended a sputtering hydroponics system. "We were abandoned here years ago," Jax explained. "The station promised us transport to a better life, lied to us. Now we're just forgotten." "We survive," the gray woman added, her voice raspy. "But it is hard." "It's not just the station," Jax continued, his voice hardening. "There's something else, something worse." "The Silent Hand." Brian frowned. "The Silent Hand? Who are they?" "Raiders," Jax replied. "They come in the night, steal our supplies, our technology, sometimes. Our people, they're searching for something. An artifact, they say. Something hidden on the station." Zara's bioluminescence flickered, a hint of violet creeping into the blue. "They believe it holds great power," Jax continued, "and they'll stop at nothing to find it." A cold dread washed over Brian. "And what does this have to do with us?" Jax's gaze turned sharp. "They've been asking about you, about the Elysian child. They think she knows something, that she's the key to finding the artifact." Brian felt a surge of protectiveness towards Zara. "What artifact?" Jax shrugged. "No one knows for sure. Some say it's a weapon. Others say it's a source of unlimited energy. All I know is the Silent Hand wants it, and they're willing to kill for it." Brian's mind raced. Zara, the artifact, her mother. It was all starting to come together. "Zara's mother," he said slowly. "She was involved with this, wasn't she?" Jax nodded grimly. "That's what we think. She was asking questions, poking around in places she shouldn't have been. Then she disappeared. And now they think Zara knows something," Brian finished, his voice grim. "That's why they're after her." Jax nodded. "That's why you're both in danger." He paused. "We can offer you shelter, protection, but in return, we need your help. Our life support systems are failing. We need someone who knows how to fix them." Brian looked around the cramped, desperate shelter. He thought of Zara, her fear, her loneliness. He thought of his own past, his own losses. He made a decision. "I can help," he said. "I'll fix your life support systems, but you have to protect Zara. She's all I've got." Jax nodded. "Agreed. Welcome to the forgotten corner of Xylos Station. Let's see if we can't keep each other alive." As Brian began to examine the damaged life support systems, he noticed a panel that seemed out of place. He pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, he found a map, a detailed schematic of Xylos Station, showing a network of secret tunnels and hidden locations. "What's this?" he muttered, tracing the lines with his finger. Suddenly, Zara tugged at his sleeve. Her bioluminescence was a chaotic mix of colors, fear, anxiety, and something else. Something he couldn't quite identify. "Sad," she whispered. "Someone very sad, hiding." Brian followed her gaze. She was looking at a young woman huddled in the corner, her face pale and drawn. He hadn't noticed her before. She was trying to blend into the shadows, to become invisible. Her name was Maya. Zara approached Maya cautiously, her hand outstretched. Maya flinched, But Zara persisted, her bioluminescence shifting to a gentle, comforting green. Slowly, hesitantly, Maya reached out and took Zara's hand. A wave of emotion washed over Zara, and she gasped. "She saw something," Zara said, her voice trembling. "Something terrible." Brian approached Maya cautiously. "What did you see?" he asked gently. Maya hesitated, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Then she took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "I saw them," she said. "The silent hand. They were torturing someone, a prisoner. They wanted information about the artifact, about Zara." Brian's blood ran cold. "What did they say?" They said Zara was the key, that she knew where the artifact was hidden, that they would find her, no matter what." Maya shivered, her eyes filled with terror. "They're coming," she whispered. "They're coming for us all. I know where it is," Maya continued, her voice trembling. "The artifact. I know where they're hiding it." Brian stared at her, his mind racing. "How do you know?" I overheard them talking," Maya stammered. "They think it's safe, that no one knows about it. But I do." She looked at Zara, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and purpose. "I can take you there," she said, "but it's heavily guarded. It's a trap." Before Brian could respond, a coded message crackled over Jax's corn. Jax listened intently, his face growing grim. "They're coming," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "The silent hand. They're planning a major raid. Tonight." Brian looked at Zara, her face pale but determined. He looked at Jax, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and purpose. He looked at Maya, her hand still clasped in Zara's, her face a mask of terror and hope. "We have to defend the shelters," Brian said, his voice firm. "We have to protect the artifact. And we have to protect each other." Jax nodded. "Agreed. We'll fortify the shelters, we'll set traps, we'll fight them to the last breath." As they began to prepare for the attack, Zara suddenly stiffened, her bioluminescence flaring with a strange, unfamiliar energy. She turned towards the entrance of the shelter, her eyes wide with shock. "Someone's here," she whispered. "Someone familiar." Brian followed her gaze, his hand instinctively reaching for his plasma pistol. A figure emerged from the shadows, her face hidden beneath the hooded cloak. As she stepped into the light, Brian recognized her. It was Rena. Her face was etched with guilt and remorse. Her eyes pleaded for forgiveness. "I'm here to help," she said, her voice barely audible. "I want to make amends." Before Rena could explain herself, a deafening explosion rocked the shelters. Red lights flashed, alarms blared, and the sound of gunfire filled the air. The silent hand had arrived. The battle for the forgotten corner of Xylos Station had begun. The shelters erupted in chaos. Energy weapons sizzled, carving gouges in the plasteel walls, and shock grenades detonated with blinding flashes and concussive force. Refugees screamed, scrambling for cover behind overturned tables and hastily erected barricades. Brian cursed, yanking a sheet of salvaged durasteel from a collapsed bunk frame. "Jax, get those kids behind us," he barked, already jamming the plasteel into makeshift brackets he'd welded together earlier that day. The metal groaned in protest, but held. He'd rigged tripwires earlier, thin strands of near-invisible monofilament connected to salvaged alarm klaxon. A shrill screech echoed as one was triggered, momentarily disorienting a squad of approaching silent hand soldiers. Jax, face grim, directed a group of children towards a hidden alcove behind a false wall. He brandished a scavenged plasma pistol, its energy cell flickering ominously. "Keep low," They won't expect us to fight back, but we will," he yelled over the din, his voice hoarse. He knew these shelters like the back of his hand, every hidden passage, every weak point. Zara, eyes wide with terror, stood frozen. Her lavender-blue skin pulsed with erratic flickers of violet and gray. Brian grabbed her gently, pulling her close. "Zara, listen to me. I need you to focus. Can you feel them?" She closed her eyes, her delicate three-fingered hands trembling. Her bioluminescence intensified, swirling with new patterns. They're coming from the west and the south. They're angry. Her voice was barely a whisper. Suddenly, a figure materialized from the shadows. A whirlwind of motion and lethal grace. Rena, her face a mask of steadfast perseverance, wielded a pair of energy blades, deflecting blaster fire with impossible speed. She moved with a practiced efficiency, cutting down silent-hand soldiers with ruthless precision. But her eyes, they held a coldness that chilled Brian to the bone. Whose side was she really on? During a brief lull in the fighting, Rena darted towards Zara, her voice urgent. "The artifact. They want the artifact. It's more dangerous than you can imagine. They won't hesitate to kill anyone who gets in their way." Brian shoved Zara behind him, stepping between her and Rena. "What do you know about it? And why should we trust you?" Distrust laced every word. Rena's heart made. "There's no time to explain. Just know that the artifact is a weapon, a tool of immense power. The Shadow Group will use it to manage this whole sector." Before Brian could ask more, a burst of energy fire struck their thin barrier. Sparks burst as the metal warped. "Take cover," Jax yelled, firing back from a close doorway. Maya, holding her injured arm, moved towards them. "They're aimed at the main building. They think the artifact is hidden there." Brian didn't hesitate. He grabbed Zara's hand. "Jax, cover us." "Maya, show us the way." They sprinted through the chaotic maze of corridors, dodging blaster fire and leaping over fallen debris. They reached the central shelter to find its defenses shattered, the entrance a gaping hole. Silent hand soldiers swarmed inside. Pushing past the fallen defenders, they found a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed behind a false wall. Inside, a small metallic object rested on a pedestal, emitting a faint, pulsating energy that made the air crackle. It was smooth, cold to the touch, and thrummed with an unseen power. As Zara reached out to touch it, her eyes glazed over. Her bioluminescence flared, bathing the chamber in an ethereal light. She gasped, her body trembling. "Mother?" she whispered, her voice filled with a mix of wonder and terror. A holographic image flickered into existence before her, a ghostly apparition of her mother, her expression grave. "Zara, my child, do not touch it. The artifact. It corrupts. It promises power, but it delivers only destruction. The silent hand seeks to exploit its darkness. You must not let them succeed." The image flickered and died, leaving Zara shaken and disoriented. A voice, cold and devoid of emotion, echoed through the chamber. "So, the Elysian whelp knows its purpose. Pity. It will make things messier." The overseer, a tall, imposing figure clad in black armor and a featureless mask, stepped into the chamber, flanked by 2 elite guards. "Hand over the artifact, child. Your cooperation will be rewarded." Brian stepped in front of Zara, his eyes blazing with defiance. "Get out of here. You won't get your hands on her or that thing." "Foolish human," the overseer hissed. "You cannot protect her. The artifact belongs to us. The overseer signaled, and his guards lunged forward. Brian met them head-on, his fists flying. He was no match for their superior training and weaponry, but he fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Zara, seeing Brian struggling, focused her empathic abilities. She reached out with her mind, disrupting the overseer's mental focus, creating a momentary lapse in his concentration. Brian seized the opportunity, landing a solid blow on the overseer's helmet. The overseer staggered back, momentarily stunned. But it wasn't enough. With a swift movement, the overseer recovered and disarmed Brian. Slamming him against the wall, he grabbed Zara, his grip tight. "Take the artifact," he commanded his guards. "Zara!" Brian screamed, struggling against his restraints. Jax and Maya, seeing Brian's plight, created a diversion, unleashing a barrage of plasma fire from the doorway. The overseer's guards were momentarily distracted, giving Brian a chance to break free. But it was too late. The overseer vanished into the shadows, dragging Zara with him. Brian collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, his heart shattered. "Zara." Jax placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have to go. They'll be back." Brian looked up, his eyes filled with despair. "We have to retrieve her. I must retrieve her." "Their camp is strongly guarded," Jax cautioned. "It's reckless." Maya, her face set, spoke up. "There's a detour, a hidden route. It leads to their base, but it's extremely dangerous. It may even be a trap." Brian rose to his feet, his eyes sharp. "I don't care. I'm going in. Zara's counting on me." He looked at Jax and Maya, his eyes filled with perseverance. "Are you with me?" Jax nodded grimly. "Always." Maya hesitated, then nodded as well. "Let's go get her back." Together, they turned and disappeared into the darkness of the secret passage, their faces etched with stubborn persistence, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them in the depths. The passage swallowed them whole, the air thick with the scent of damp earth, and something faintly metallic pressed in around Brian. The beam from his pulse torch danced across walls slick with moisture, illuminating clusters of fungi that pulsed with a sickly green light. It was close, too close. He could feel the rough-hewn stone against his shoulders, the weight of the earth above. "Energy signatures," Jax murmured, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "Faint, but definitely present. Surveillance, maybe even booby traps." Brian ran a hand along the wall, his fingers tracing the uneven surface. "Could be anything. Old tech, jury-rigged defenses. Silent Hand doesn't strike me as subtle." His gaze swept the passage ahead. He spotted it then, a hairline fracture in the rock face, almost invisible in the dim light. A thin wire stretched tautly across their path. Tripwire. Pressure. Sensitive. Explosive. I'd wager. He knelt, pulling a small toolkit from his pack. The air hung still, each breath a conscious act. He carefully detached a micro-cutter, its tip glowing blue as it sliced through the wire. Disarmed, but I doubt that's the only welcome wagon they left for us. "This place," Maya trailed off, her voice hushed. "It's older than the Silent Hand. Much older. This passage, it was built by the Krill. Long-lost civilization, obsessed with artifacts and secrets. They moved deeper, the passage twisting and turning like a burrow. Every few meters, they encountered a locked door, crudely fashioned from metal and reinforced with scavenged components. Jax, his brow furrowed in concentration, worked quickly, the hum of his lockpicks a constant drone. With a soft click, another door swung inward. Behind it lay a small chamber, barely large enough to stand in. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of decay. Skeletal remains lay scattered across the floor, picked clean by time and unseen scavengers. Cryptic symbols, etched into the walls, seemed to writhe in the torchlight. Brian felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, a faint echo of Zara's empathic presence, a lingering sadness clinging to the stone. He didn't mention it, but the weight of it settled in his chest. Deeper in, they found a hidden alcove, filled high with crates of team gear and items, energy weapons, power packs, supply kits, the proof they needed. The silent hand was here, deep within the Krill passage. "Hear that?" Brian murmured, holding up a hand. A faint humming sound, almost imperceptible, resonated from the walls. Power source, maybe? Or some kind of communication system. Maya examined the symbols in the alcove, her fingers tracing their outlines. They speak of rituals, of the artifact. This passage, it was used for something dark. The passage began to slope downwards, the air growing thicker, hotter, more humid. The walls closed in, pressing against them, stealing their breath. Claustrophobia clawed at Brian, a primal fear he fought to suppress. A guttural snarl shattered the silence. From the shadows ahead, a pack of creatures lunged, their bodies twisted and warped, their eyes glowing with feral hunger. Mutated, corrupted by something within the passage. The fight was brief, brutal. Pulse fire ripped through the air, the creatures falling in twitching heaps. Jax cried out, clutching his arm. Blood seeped between his fingers. "Just a scratch," he grunted, but his face was pale. Brian knelt beside him, pulling out a medkit. "Let me see." He quickly assessed the wound, a deep gash across Jax's forearm. Lucky it missed the artery. Still needs stitches. He worked quickly, efficiently, his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. They pressed on, the passage opening into a large chamber. A massive reinforced door blocked their path, its surface covered in intricate circuitry and glowing energy conduits. An impenetrable barrier. Jax ran a diagnostic tool over the door's surface. Complex security system. This will take time. As Jax worked, a holographic projection flickered to life above the door. The overseer's face, cold and cruel, filled the chamber. "Welcome, trespassers," he sneered. "I've been expecting you," Jax cursed under his breath. "You thought you could sneak into our sanctuary?" The overseer's image shimmered, his eyes burning with malice. "Foolish. Your efforts are futile." He tapped a control on his console. "Allow me to expedite your departure." A series of alarms blared, the chamber vibrating with a low, ominous thrum. "A self-destruct sequence has been initiated. The passage will collapse in 15 minutes. Brian felt a cold dread wash over him. 15 minutes. To escape or to find another way forward. "Jax, can you disable it?" Jax shook his head, his face grim. "Not enough time. The system's locked down. I can't even get a diagnostic." Maya stepped forward, her expression grave. "There's another way. A ventilation shaft. It might lead to their base. But it's small, unstable, and probably a one-way trip." Brian stared at the massive door, then at the narrow, dark opening of the ventilation shaft. 15 minutes? A choice between certain death and a desperate gamble. Brian didn't hesitate. "I'm going in." Jax, propped against the wall, started to protest. "Davis, you can't be serious. I should go. I know their tactics." "You're injured," Brian countered, his voice firm, "and we don't have time to argue. Every second counts for Zara." Maya, her fingers flying across her wrist-mounted console, confirmed Brian's assessment with grim certainty. The ventilation system is structurally compromised. Sections are prone to collapse, and sensors are picking up pockets of unknown gases, highly corrosive, potentially lethal. Brian grimaced, already pulling out a compact plasma cutter and a reinforced pry bar from his pack. Wonderful. He knelt at the access panel, the metal cold against his gloved fingers. The opening was barely large enough for a child, let alone a grown man in a tactical vest. He set the cutter to a low setting, carefully widening the entrance. Sparks showered around him, the acrid smell of burning metal filling the narrow corridor. "I'm going first," Jax insisted, pushing himself upright with a grunt. "I can clear the way." Brian met his gaze, recognizing the stubborn loyalty etched on his face. "You clear the way by staying here and keeping comms open. Zara and Maya are behind me. That's the best way you can help us." With the opening widened, Brian took a deep breath and squeezed through. The metal edges scraped against his armor, the confined space immediately pressing in on him. The ventilation shaft was even more cramped than he'd imagined, barely wide enough to crawl through. Dust motes danced in the beam of his helmet lamp, the air thick with the musty odor of disuse and decay. A wave of claustrophobia washed over him, cold and suffocating. His heart hammered against his ribs, his breath catching in his throat. He fought to control the panic rising within him, focusing on the image of Zara, her lavender-blue skin and wide, trusting eyes. "Just keep moving, Davis." One foot in front of the other, he felt a small hand on his back. Zara, her 3 delicate fingers pressed gently against his spine, and he felt a faint warmth spreading through him. He glanced back. Her bioluminescence, usually a soft, flickering lavender, had shifted to a calming, steady green, a silent reassurance. He managed a shaky nod and continued crawling, the metal grating digging into his knees. After several meters, the shaft narrowed further, leading to a section that had partially collapsed. Twisted metal and crumbling plasteel blocked their path. "Hold up," Brian said, his voice tight. "Collapsed section. I'll need to rig a support." He pulled out several interlocking struts from his pack, scavenged from a derelict freighter years ago. They weren't designed for this, but they were all he had. Working quickly, he wedged the struts into place, creating a makeshift archway to prevent further collapse. As he worked, his light caught on a small rectangular metal plate embedded in the wall of the shaft. He brushed away the grime, revealing a faint inscription in an archaic script. He ran the data through his helmet's translator. "Atmospheric Purification System Sector 7. Toxin Filtration. Experimental Compound VX9. The words sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't just a ventilation system. It was designed to filter airborne toxins. The silent hand wasn't just experimenting with cybernetics. They were developing bioweapons. A chorus of skittering sounds echoed through the shaft, growing louder with each passing second. Something was moving within the confined space, something fast and agile. "We're not alone in here," Brian whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. A blur of movement erupted from the shadows. A creature, barely recognizable as having once been a rodent, lunged at Jax, its teeth bared and eyes glowing with feral hunger. It injected a long, needle-like proboscis into Jax's exposed arm. Jax cried out, collapsing against the wall. Brian reacted instantly, drawing his sidearm and firing a precise burst. The creature convulsed and fell silent, its mutated body twitching in the dust. Brian knelt beside Jax, his face etched with concern. "Jax, what did it do to you?" Jax's breathing was shallow and ragged. "Paralyzed. Toxin." Brian cursed under his breath. He didn't have an antidote. Zara knelt beside Jax, her brow furrowed with concentration. Her bioluminescence pulsed with an intense, almost painful light, shifting rapidly between shades of blue and green. She placed her hand on Jax's arm, directly over the injection site. "Zara, no! It could be dangerous," Brian began, but stopped as he saw a faint tremor run through Jax's body. His breathing became slightly easier, his eyes less glazed. "Better," Jax gasped, his voice weak but clearer. "She's helping." Brian stared at Zara, his legs shaking. She was somehow counteracting the toxin's effects. A latent Elysian ability, perhaps. "We have to keep moving," Maya urged, her voice tight with urgency. "The self-destruct sequence is accelerating." "I'm picking up increased tremors." Brian knew she was right. He secured his tool and, with a burst of effort, hoisted Jax over his shoulder in a carry. The added weight was almost unbearable, exacerbating his claustrophobia and straining his muscles. The ventilation shaft vibrated violently, the metal groaning under the stress. Dust rained down from the ceiling, stinging his eyes. They reached a junction point with 3 branching paths leading in different directions. "Which way, Maya?" Brian asked, his voice strained. I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice filled with uncertainty. "The system is ancient. The original schematics are incomplete. I think it's the left path, but—" Brian gritted his teeth. They were running out of time. As he shifted Jax's weight, his hand brushed against something hidden behind a loose panel. He pried it open, revealing a small, concealed compartment. Inside he found a datapad. "Jackpot," he muttered. Slipping the datapad into his pocket, he'd analyze it later. For now, survival was the priority. They continued along the left path, the ventilation shaft growing wider and more unstable with each meter. Finally, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Brian crawled through the opening and found himself in a hidden observation post, overlooking the Silent Hand's main laboratory. From the observation post, Brian, Zara, and Maya witnessed the Silent Hand operatives frantically evacuating the main laboratory below. The scene was a whirlwind of panicked gestures and hurried movements, figures scurrying like disturbed insects. Distant alarms blared, punctuated by the clipped, shouted orders echoing through the base's ventilation system. Maya leaned closer to the observation window, her brow furrowed. "There, I see him." Brian followed her gaze, spotting a tall, imposing figure directing the chaos with an air of cold authority. "Who is it?" "Dr. Aris Thorne," Maya said, her voice tight. "The Silent Hand's leader on this station. He's the one we need to worry about." Brian used the observation post's surveillance system, a series of flickering monitors displaying grainy images, to zoom in on Thorne. The image sharpened, revealing a face etched with ruthless commitment. Then Brian noticed it a distinct symbol embroidered on Thorne's uniform, a stylized serpent coiled around a shattered planet. He hadn't seen it before, but it felt significant. "That symbol, do you recognize it?" Maya shook her head. "Never seen it, but I don't like it." Beside him, Zara whimpered softly. Her lavender-blue skin flickered with agitated patterns, the bioluminescence shifting between dull violet and anxious gray. Brian placed a comforting hand on her small shoulder. "What is it, Zara?" She looked up at him, her 7-faceted eyes wide with fear. Scared. There. Very scared. And desperate. The wave of fear and desperation emanating from the operatives below was clearly intensifying her distress. Ryan turned back to the surveillance system, his mind racing. He needed more information. He ran a diagnostic on the observation post systems, a series of clicks and whirs filling the small space. Looks like the communication system is still functional. He adjusted the frequency, hoping to catch something useful. Static crackled through the speakers then, a voice cold and precise, cut through the noise. "Ensure all personnel are evacuated immediately. I am initiating the automated defense protocols. Code Omega 9. Repeat, Code Omega 9. It was Thorn." Maya's face paled. "Omega Nine? That's the base's automated defense system. Lethal security drones, laser grids, the works. And?" Brian prompted, his voice tight. "And they're programmed to target any unauthorized personnel, which unfortunately includes us." Brian swore under his breath. They were trapped, and now they were targets. He gripped the edge of the console, his fingers tightening. "We need to disable those defenses. Now." Zara tugged at his sleeve, her bioluminescence pulsing with a brighter, more insistent blue. She pointed a delicate 3-fingered hand towards a specific console in the observation post, a panel covered in blinking lights and alien glyphs. It was a console Brian hadn't even noticed before. "That one," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Controls the defenses." Her Elysian intuition, it seemed, was guiding them. Brian moved to the console, his fingers flying across the unfamiliar controls. He tried to access the system, but a holographic display flickered to life, revealing a complex encryption algorithm, a swirling vortex of code that seemed impenetrable. "Locked. Tight. I can bypass it," Maya said, her fingers already dancing across her own datapad. "But it's going to take time. And that self-destruct sequence." She glanced at the timer display, the numbers ticking down relentlessly. "Is getting awfully close to its final stages." Brian glanced over at Jax, who was slumped against the wall, his breathing shallow and ragged. The paralyzing toxin was clearly taking its toll. "How is he?" Maya checked Jax's vitals on her datapad. "Not good. He needs medical attention, and he needs it now." Zara, her brow furrowed with concentration, reached out and gently placed her hand on Jax's forehead. The soft, lavender glow emanated from her skin, bathing Jax's face in a soothing light. His breathing seemed to ease slightly. "She's stabilizing him," Maya said, her voice filled with surprise. "Temporarily, at least. Buying us some time." Brian nodded, grateful for Zara's unique abilities. "Keep working on that encryption, Maya." Minutes stretched into an eternity. The only sounds the frantic tapping of Maya's fingers and the relentless ticking of the self-destruct timer. Finally, Maya let out a triumphant cry. "Got it! Encryption bypassed!" Brian didn't waste a second. He accessed the defense system controls, his fingers moving quickly across the alien interface. He began deactivating the automated defenses, one system at a time. Security drones, laser grids, automated turrets. He methodically shut them down. But just as he thought they were in the clear, a klaxon blared, and a red warning light flashed on the console. "Failsafe program activated," Maya yelled. Secondary layer of security. Before they could react, a laser grid slammed down, blocking their only exit from the observation post. A wall of shimmering red energy stood between them and freedom. Damn it! Brian smacked his palm on the console. They were trapped again. He scanned the room, desperate for a solution. There's a power rerouting system, Maya said, pointing to another console. We could try to reroute power from the life support system to disable the laser grid. And risk losing our oxygen supply? Brian asked, his voice grim. It's the only way, Maya said, her expression resolute. Unless you have another idea. Brian looked at Zara, her eyes reflecting the red glow of the laser grid. He looked at Jax, his face pale and drawn. He didn't have another idea. Do it, he said, his voice tight. Maya worked quickly, rerouting the power. The lights in the observation post flickered, and a low hum filled the air. The oxygen levels began to drop, the numbers on the display slowly decreasing. Zara coughed, her hand flying to her mouth. Brian felt a tightness in his chest, his breathing becoming labored. He glanced at the laser grid, willing it to disappear. Finally, with a surge of energy, the laser grid flickered and died, the red light vanishing. It's down, Maya cried, gasping for air. Go, go, go. They didn't hesitate. Brian scooped up Zara, and Maya helped support Jax as they stumbled towards the deactivated laser grid and through the narrow opening. They couldn't afford to stay any longer. As they hurried away from the observation post, Brian looked back at Jax, his face etched with concern. We'll be back for him, Zara, he said, his voice hoarse but firm. As soon as we reach a safe location, I promise. He squeezed her hand, reassuring her. He had to get them out of here, and he had to keep his promise. The tremor threw them against the cold plasteel wall, the metallic tang of blood already thick in the air. Brian shoved Zara behind him, his pulse hammering against his ribs. Maya, status. Cameras down. Maya's voice crackled in his ear, strained. Locking mechanism bypassed, for now. Go, go, go. The holding cell door hissed open just enough to squeeze through. Inside, Jax lay slumped against the far wall, his breathing shallow and ragged. His skin, normally a deep umber, was mottled with sickly greens and yellows. Zara whimpered, her skin cycling through rapid, distressed patterns of violet and grey. She reached out a trembling hand, her 3 delicate fingers brushing against Jax's arm. Sick, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the low thrum of the bass. Brian scooped Jax up, his weight surprising. He needs a medic, and fast. He spared a glance back at the cell door, already beginning to reseal itself. Let's move. As they stumbled out of the holding area, a klaxon blared, bathing the corridor in flashing red light. Automated turrets swiveled, their targeting lasers painting the walls. Hit, Maya swore. We tripped the alarm. Thorne knows we're here. Dr. Thorne's voice, cold and clinical, echoed through the base's comm system. Lockdown initiated. Seal all sectors. Deploy hunter drones. Eliminate intruders. A swarm of sleek black drones detached from the ceiling, their lenses glowing with malevolent red light. They moved with unnerving speed and precision, their thermal sensors sweeping the corridor. Those are hunter killers, Maya said, her voice tight with urgency. Thermal imaging, advanced tracking algorithms, they won't give up. Brian scanned their surroundings, his mind racing. There! Ventilation shaft. He pointed to a narrow opening high on the wall. It's a tight fit, but it's our only chance. Maya frowned. That leads to a restricted area. I couldn't crack those security protocols. It's probably unsafe. We have no option. Brian helped Zara reach Maya. Then, with effort, pulled himself up after them. Jax carried on his back. The ventilation shaft was cramped and stifling, the air thick with the acrid smell of chemical. Jagged metal edges scraped against their skin as they crawled forward, the drone's relentless hum growing louder behind them. Gah! Maya choked, clutching her throat. Toxic gases. I can barely breathe. Zara's bioluminescence flared, casting an eerie glow on the grimy walls. She reached out her small hand, guiding Brian forward. This way, air. Better. Brian followed her lead, trusting her instincts. She seemed to sense pockets of breathable air amidst the toxic fumes, her skin pulsing with a faint, life-giving light. Jax coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Toxin. Specific genetic markers, he gasped. Elysian. Vulnerable. Brian's blood ran cold. He looked at Zara, her lavender skin already tinged with a faint, sickly green. Zara, are you feeling okay? She shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. Hurt. Inside. They reached the end of the ventilation shaft and dropped into a darkened laboratory. The air was marginally cleaner, but the room reeked of formaldehyde and something else. Something indefinably alien and disturbing. Holographic displays flickered, casting eerie shadows on rows of stasis pods filled with grotesque, genetically modified creatures. Surgical instruments lay scattered across steel tables, stained with dried blood. A holographic recording flickered to life, showing Dr. Thorne, his face gaunt and fanatical. Progress requires sacrifice, he intoned, his voice devoid of emotion. The perfection of the human form demands the elimination of genetic impurities. Through manipulation, through augmentation, we shall forge a superior race. He gestured to a complex array of genetic sequencing equipment, and the key lies within the Elysian genome, their psychic potential, their empathic abilities. They are the next step in human evolution. Thorne's image zoomed in on a holographic representation of Elysian DNA. Zara's unique genetic markers. They hold the key to unlocking new levels of psychic power. Zara cried out, clutching her head. Her bioluminescence pulsed erratically, a chaotic storm of colors. Pain. Too much. Suddenly, a shimmering energy field snapped into existence, sealing off the laboratory. Thorne's image reappeared on a nearby display, his eyes gleaming with manic intensity. "Welcome, intruders," he said, his voice dripping with false cordiality. "I've been expecting you. I trust you've enjoyed your little tour of my humble abode, but now it's time for you to fulfill your purpose. Zara, you will become the cornerstone of my new world order." Before Brian could react, the entire base shuddered violently. Red lights flashed, and a computerized voice announced, "Self-destruct sequence initiated. T-5 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately." Thorne's hologram flickered and died, replaced by static. The laboratory walls groaned under the strain. Outside, a deafening explosion ripped through the base, sending shockwaves through the floor. The world was a cacophony of alarms, crackling energy, and the sickening crunch of plasteel giving way. Dust choked the air, stinging Brian's eyes as he pulled Zara tighter against him, his body a shield against the rain of debris. A sparking wire danced near his boot, spitting blue arc. Beside them, Maya wrestled with a control panel. her fingers flying across the unresponsive keys. Containment fields offline. Systems fried. Jax coughed, a wet, rattling sound that sent a shiver of dread down Brian's spine. He was slumped against a console, his face pale and slick with sweat. Go. Get Zara out, he gasped, each word a struggle. Zara whimpered, her lavender skin flickering with agitated violet streaks. She tugged at Brian's sleeve, her seven-faceted eyes wide with fear, but also something else, something focused. Energy, hidden, she whispered, pointing a trembling three-fingered hand towards a section of wall behind a mangled console. Brian didn't hesitate. He trusted Zara's instincts, whatever they were. He grabbed a twisted piece of metal and began prying at the damaged console, sparks flying as he forced the plasteel apart. Maya, cover us. With a final wrench, the panel gave way, revealing a small, humming backup generator and a crude manual override switch. Jackpot, Brian muttered, flicking the switch. Almost there, Maya shouted, rerouting power from the generator. The containment field flickered, sputtered, and died with a final hiss. But the lab groaned in protest, the ceiling threatening to collapse. It's destabilizing the whole structure. We have to move. They scrambled through the debris-strewn lab, each step a gamble. Twisted metal crunched underfoot, and the air hung thick with the smell of ozone and burning plastic. A section of the ceiling gave way with a deafening roar, sending a cloud of dust and debris cascading down where they'd been standing moments before. Zara cried out, clutching her head. Her bioluminescence flared violently, a chaotic storm of color. Pain. Visions. She gasped, her voice tight with agony. Passage, hidden, behind books. Brian scanned the room, his gaze landing on a large bookshelf partially obscured by fallen debris. He heaved a sigh of relief. All right, kid. Lead the way. He moved to the bookshelf, running his hand along the spines until he found a seam. It wasn't a bookshelf at all, but a cleverly disguised doorway. With a grunt, he pulled the section open, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel. Down we go. As they stepped inside, the air grew noticeably cooler, and the sounds of the lab faded behind them. The tunnel was dimly lit by flickering emergency lights, revealing walls of rough-hewn rock. Further in, a deactivated security drone lay on its side, its optical sensors dark. Hold up, Maya said, approaching the drone cautiously. I might be able to get something out of this. She produced a small interface cable and connected it to the drone's access port. After a few tense seconds, her face lit up. Got it! A map of the tunnel network and a hidden emergency exit. Her expression darkened. Damn it! The silent hand knows about these tunnels. They've deployed hunter drones to patrol the area. Jack stumbled, his legs giving way beneath him. Brian caught him before he hit the ground. Jax, stay with us! Jax's breathing was shallow and ragged. No. Go. Save Zara. Can't make it. He fumbled with his prosthetic arm, his fingers finding a hidden compartment. With a final effort, he opened it, revealing a small vial filled with a clear liquid. Antitoxin. Hidden compartment. Brian didn't hesitate. He snapped the vial open and administered the antitoxin to Jax. A faint flush returned to Jax's face, and his breathing eased slightly. That'll buy you some time, but it's not a cure. Zara gasped, her skin pulsing with a frantic, uneven light. Drones. Coming close. Very close. Brian swore under his breath. They were running out of time. He looked at Maya, his eyes filled with steadfast perseverance. We have to split up. Maya, you get Jax to that emergency exit. I'll create a diversion. Draw the drones away. Are you crazy? Maya protested. You can't take them on alone. I don't have a choice, Brian said, his voice firm. Zara needs to get out of here, and Jax needs help. Go. Now. Maya hesitated for a moment, then nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and respect. Be careful, Brian. She helped Jax to his feet, and they disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. As soon as they were gone, Brian turned to Zara. All right, kid. Time for a little misdirection. He grabbed a discarded energy cell and began rigging it to a section of unstable conduit on the tunnel wall. Zara watched him, her expression a mixture of fear and trust. They are coming, she whispered. I know, Brian said, finishing his makeshift bomb. That's the point. He activated the device and grabbed Zara's hand. Run! They sprinted down the tunnel, the hum of the approaching hunter drones growing louder with each passing second. Brian led Zara towards a section of the tunnel network where unstable energy conduits crisscrossed the walls. He banged his head against one of the conduits, causing it to spark and crackle. Here they come! The hunter drones rounded the corner, their weapons systems charging. Brian grinned. Time to say good night. He detonated the energy cell. The resulting explosion was deafening, a blinding flash of light and a wave of heat that sent them sprawling. The tunnel shook violently, and a section of the ceiling collapsed, blocking their path forward. Brian coughed, spitting out dust and debris. He looked around, his heart sinking. They were trapped. Damn it. Zara tugged at his sleeve, her bioluminescence dim but steady. Maya. Jax. They are. Wrong way. Brian frowned. What do you mean? Dead end. They go to dead end. Zara's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. Danger they do not see. Danger they do not see. Zara's voice trailed off, her small hands flying to her head. A sharp, involuntary cry escaped her lips, her lavender skin flashing a chaotic mix of violet and gray. Brian crouched low, his gaze sweeping the newly revealed passage. Dust motes danced in the dim light, illuminated by Zara's erratic bioluminescence. The air hung thick with the smell of damp earth and freshly broken rock. He ran a hand along the rough-hewn wall, feeling the instability. Looks like a cave-in, he muttered, his voice tight. Partial blockage, but we can probably squeeze through. Zara gasped, her 7-faceted eyes wide with pain. Maya, Jax, deeper. They go to the end. She pressed her temples, fighting through the psychic feedback. They do not know. Dead end. Brian's teeth clenched. He grabbed a loose piece of plasteel from the wreckage of the drone and began prying at a large, precariously balanced rock. All right, kiddo. Let's clear this mess. Stay back. He worked quickly but carefully, mindful of the unstable ceiling. Each movement sent tremors through the tunnel. Zara, despite her pain, focused her bioluminescence, bathing the tunnel in an ethereal glow. The light revealed the treacherous nature of the passage. Hairline fractures spiderwebbing across the rock face, loose shale threatening to crumble at any moment. Careful, Brian. There, above you. He glanced up, seeing the unstable formation, just in time to brace himself as a shower of pebbles rained down. Thanks, Zara. As he cleared a particularly large boulder, his hand brushed against something unexpected, a section of the wall that felt different. He ran his fingers along the surface, discovering a seam. With a grunt, he pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a tattered, damaged map of the tunnel network, etched onto a thin sheet of metal. The map detailed a possible alternate route, bypassing the dead end. Before he could examine it further, Zara cried out again, her light flaring crimson. More coming from the other way. Silent hand, but far. Brian's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the map, then back at Zara. Alternate route it is. Hopefully, it'll get us there faster and keep us away from those fanatics. We need to reach Maya and Jax. He took Zara's hand, his grip firm but gentle. This way. The alternate route proved even more treacherous than the first. The passage narrowed, forcing them to squeeze through, and the air grew thick with a pungent, metallic odor. Zara coughed, her bioluminescence dimming. Gases. Toxic. Brian ripped a strip of cloth from his shirt and soaked it in the water from his canteen, handing it to Zara. He did the same for himself, makeshift filters. It's not much, but it'll have to do. He pressed the damp cloth to her face, his eyes filled with concern. The toxic fumes stung his eyes and burned his lungs. He could only imagine what Zara was feeling. Her psychic abilities, he knew, were tied to her physical well-being. He glanced at her, seeing the strain etched on her face. Her light flickered weakly, a pale, sickly blue. I cannot see them so well, she whispered, her voice raspy. The gas, it hurts. Brian stopped, kneeling before her. He took her face in his hands, his gaze intense. Hey, look at me. You're doing great. Just focus, Zara. Think about Maya and Jax. They need us. We need you. You're strong, Zara. I know you are. He paused, then added softly, we're a team. Zara closed her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. Her bioluminescence flickered, then steadied, regaining some of its lavender hue. I see them. They are at the end, under attack, a drone. Silent hand. Brian's heart leaped into his throat. Come on. He pushed forward, ignoring the burning in his lungs, pulling Zara along with him. They scrambled through the narrow passage, the air growing thicker and more toxic with each step. Finally they burst through the last section of the passage, emerging into a large cavern. And there, in the center of the cavern, a scene of deadly chaos unfolded. Maya and Jax were pinned down behind a cluster of stalagmites, desperately firing at a sleek black hunter drone hovering menacingly above them. The drone's energy weapon crackled with deadly power, and Jax was slumped against the rock, his breathing shallow and ragged. The drone was turning towards Maya, weapon charging. Brian roared, adrenaline surging through him. He charged towards the drone, drawing his plasma pistol. Hey, Tin Can, over here. The drone swiveled, its targeting sensors locking onto Brian. He dived behind a stalagmite, narrowly avoiding a blast of energy. He knew he couldn't win a straight-up firefight. He needed to get close. He needed to use his head. As the drone repositioned, Zara focused her psychic energy. The drone's targeting systems flickered erratically, its movements becoming jerky and unpredictable. It fired wildly, blasting chunks of rock from the cavern wall. Now Brian, Zara cried, her voice strained. Brian seized the opportunity. He sprinted towards the drone, dodging its erratic fire. He knew that Silent Hand tech often prioritized firepower over shielding. As he closed the distance, he noticed a small access panel on the drone's underbelly, likely for maintenance. He aimed his plasma pistol and fired a single precise shot. The access panel blew open, showering sparks. The drone sputtered, its movements becoming even more erratic. It crashed to the ground with a metallic clang, its energy weapon fizzling out. Brian, breathing heavily, rushed to Maya and Jax. "You okay?" Maya nodded, her face grim. "Jax is getting worse. The antitoxin is wearing off." Jax coughed, his skin clammy. Drone had something here. Maya handed Brian a small data chip, recovered from the wreckage of the drone. "It's about what the Silent Hand is really planning." Brian plugged the chip into his wrist-mounted computer. The data scrolled across the screen, revealing a horrifying truth. The Silent Hand's ultimate goal was to weaponize Elysian's psychic abilities for galactic conquest. They intended to use Zara, and others like her, as living weapons. Zara gasped, clutching her head. "A presence stronger than I have ever felt." Her eyes widened with fear. Close. The cavern began to shake violently. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling. The ground trembled beneath their feet. "They are destabilizing the tunnels," Maya shouted. "They know we are here." Brian's mind raced. He looked at Jax, his condition worsening rapidly. He looked at Zara, her face pale with fear. He looked at Maya, her eyes filled with perseverance. He knew what he had to do. "Maya, you need to get Jax out of here," he said, his voice firm. "I'm going after whoever is doing this." Maya stared at him, her expression incredulous. "Are you crazy? You can't take on a psychic that powerful." "I don't have a choice," Brian said, his gaze unwavering. "They want Zara. They want to weaponize her. I'm not going to let that happen." He knelt beside Jax, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'll be back for you, I promise." He looked at Maya, his eyes filled with a mixture of purpose and regret. "Get him to safety." "That's an order." He turned to Zara, his voice soft. "Stay with Maya. Protect Jax. I'll find you." He knew he might never see them again. He knew this could be a final goodbye. But he had to do this. He had to protect them. He had to protect Zara. And with that, Brian turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Maya and Jax behind. Brian cautiously advanced through the tunnel, the oppressive silence a stark contrast to the cacophony of psychic energy that had filled it moments before. The air, thick with the residue of psychic manipulation, still clung to him, a faint pressure against his temples. With each step the sense of wrongness lessened, the suffocating weight on his mind lifting. He reached a large cavern. The Silent Hand leader lay slumped against a wall, a gaunt, imposing figure diminished by defeat. Energy conduits, now inert and sparking, snaked across the cavern floor, monuments to a failed ambition. The air no longer crackled with stolen power. It was simply still. The Silent Hand leader, barely audible, rasped, You cannot stop us. We will control the galaxy." Brian knelt, his gaze steady. "No, you won't. Zara isn't a weapon. Elysians aren't tools. They're people." Zara's voice, clear and strong in his mind, echoed his sentiment. "They are family, Brian." The Silent Hand leader, weakened and enraged, tried to lash out with a flicker of telekinesis, but it was a pathetic attempt, easily deflected by the cavern walls. Their time was over. Brian, heart-pounding, returned to Jax and Maya. He found them slumped against a wall, weakened but alive. Jax gave a shaky thumbs up. Maya managed a weak smile. The immediate threat was neutralized. They stumbled through the collapsing tunnel network, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Dust and debris rained down, obscuring their path. But Brian pressed on, driven by the need to get them to safety. They emerged, blinking, into a hidden valley bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. A waterfall cascaded down a moss-covered cliff, feeding a crystal-clear stream that meandered through lush meadows. The air was clean and fresh, filled with the scent of wildflowers and the sound of birdsong. It was a sanctuary, untouched by the Silent Hand's corruption. In the days that followed, they began to build a new life in the valley. They constructed shelters from the abundant natural materials, cultivated gardens, and explored the surrounding wilderness. Jax, with his knowledge of botany, identified edible plants and medicinal herbs. Maya, with her engineering skills, helped to create sustainable energy sources. Zara, her bioluminescence gradually returning to its vibrant hues, explored the valley with a sense of wonder and joy. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Brian knelt before Zara. "Zara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want to adopt you, to be your father, officially." Zara's eyes widened, her lavender-blue skin glowing with a soft, radiant light. She threw her arms around him, her voice filled with love. "Yes, Brian. Yes, father." Brian formally adopted Zara, solidifying their family bond in a small, heartfelt ceremony under the ancient trees of the valley. Zara's bioluminescence shone brighter than ever before, a testament to her newfound happiness and security. Word of their sanctuary spread, carried by whispers on the galactic wind. Other Elysians, seeking to escape the Silent Hand's oppression, began to arrive in the valley. Brian, Zara, Jax, and Maya welcomed them with open arms, offering them food, shelter, and a safe haven from the dangers of the galaxy. They established a refuge, a beacon of hope for those who had been exploited and oppressed. Years later, Brian and Zara stood together on a hill overlooking the valley, watching the sunset paint the sky in vibrant hues of orange, pink, and gold. Zara, now a young woman, her bioluminescence a constant, gentle glow, leaned against him, her hand resting in his. "Thank you, Father," she said softly, "for everything." Brian smiled, his heart filled with love. "You gave me more than I ever gave you, Zara. You gave me a family." He looked out over the valley, at the thriving community they had built, at the faces of the Elysians who had found peace and healing in this sanctuary. Their love, their compassion, their unwavering tenacity had created a beacon of hope in a galaxy filled with darkness. It was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit and the strength of a family forged in adversity. The setting sun cast long shadows across the valley, painting the landscape in a warm, golden light. It was a scene of perfect peace, a moment of profound beauty, a testament to the enduring power of love and compassion.